Hi guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to read from a file and how to write to another file. And the example I'm going to use is I have a file that already exists. I read every line in that file and then I output each line to another file. So essentially I'm copying a file that exists. So let's start out by adding a preprocessor directive so we can use the file streams, and here we include fstream. The next thing that we need to do is we create an object of type ifstream. So ifstream is input file stream. I call this in. You can really call this anything you want to. It's just a variable name. And the first thing that I need to do is I open the file. So let's look at the desktop. The file here that I have is myfile.txt. And so we specify this in the code. It has to be the absolute path. So it will be users cs hero desktop myfile.txt. This will be the file that we will read. And now I want to, like I said, I want to read every line in that file and write it to another file. So to write to a file, we need to create an object of ofstream, output file stream. I call this out. And here we need to open the file that we want to write to. Now what I want to do is I want to let the user select the file that we want to write to. So I don't want to hard code it in the code here. So to do this, I create a variable called file name, and I prompt the user enter a file name to write to. And then I read the input into the file name variable. And now this will hold a file name such as out.txt or copy.txt, whatever the user enters. So the path I hardcode. So the path will always be on the desktop. So it will be users cs hero desktop. And now I use the file name that the user selected. So these are the two files. I have the input file and I have the output file. The next thing I need to do is I need to read every line in the file and output it. So to do this, I create a line variable. So this line variable will store one line at a time. Let's take a look to better understand this at the file. So if I open this file, there are 3 lines. And the way I implement this is I have a loop. I read one line, such as hi there. I will store it in my line variable. Then I use that variable and write it to the output file. In the next loop iteration, it will read another line, the second line here, store it in the line variable, and then output it to the output file. And then it'll read the next line, store it in the line variable, and output to the output file. And if there are more, it'll do continuously doing it. So essentially, my line variable is just a temporary buffer where I store something. Now, I don't know how many lines there are, so I cannot use a for loop. I want to basically say read as long as there are lines. In this case, it's good to use a while loop. In order to read an entire line, I use the getLine function. It expects 2 arguments. The first one is the stream I want to read from. So in this case, I want to read from my input file stream up here that I called in. And the second argument to the getLine function is the variable I want to store the line in. In this case, I called it line. So getLine, if you're not familiar with getLine, getLine you could also use with cin. In this case, you would just pass in cin, and then it would read the input from the console into the line variable. Now I use that as part of a condition up here, the while condition, because getLine also returns a flag if the end of file was reached. So if there's more lines to read, it will basically result in a true. So the while loop will continuously looping as long as there's more lines to read from or to read in. But if the end of file was reached, it will return false, and then we'll reach the end of the file loop. Now inside the loop's body here, I can use the line variable. So the line variable now holds whatever was read from the file. What I want to do in this case, I want to output it to the output file. So I use a stream insertion operator to write it to the output file stream here. That's the output file. And then I also show on the console, we copied the line, and I output the line and the line break. Now the last thing that we need to do is close both file streams. So we close the input file stream and the output file stream. And that should be it. So let's run our program. We should get 3 copies here. So first of all, we need to specify a file name. I call this copy.txt. And then we see the 3 files that were copied, or the 3 lines in the file. So hi there, the second line, and below here, the 3rd line. So let's take a look at the desktop. Now we see my file. This was the file I read from, and a copy here that we copied to, and this has the same content. So essentially we just copied the files. All right, this should be it. So thank you for watching.